how do we use boundaries in our relationship? Typically, those of us in our relationship who are peacemakers, we get steamrolled, we get walked over. When it comes down to boundaries in your relationship, once you set that boundary, if that boundary is breached, you have to be firm and speedy with addressing it. I may be a stickler for time, but somebody else is not. I may be a stickler for a neat and tidy space, and somebody else is not. Whatever you allow to happen is more than likely to happen again and happen more frequently. And this is how we train people to treat us. So how can two people who have different views and different understandings, different perspectives, coexist with each other and keep the relationship going? The answer to me is... All right. We are back again for yet another episode of the worst relationship advice ever. You definitely should not listen to me. And we are continuing on the topic of boundaries. Today, we are going to be talking about how do we use boundaries in our relationship. So last time we spoke about the fact that we first have to set boundaries with ourselves. The better we are with setting boundaries and keeping our own boundaries, is the better we will be with setting boundaries with other people and holding the line when people are trying to push us past our boundaries. You know, when we're in love and if the loving feelings are flowing and everything is going well, there tends to be a lot of emotional overlap between us and the other person. And so we tend not to have boundaries. We want to do everything together, say everything together, and just be all about each other. And then as time goes by, as novelty wears off a bit, we see the differences between us and our person start to come to the surface. At this time, there may be some tug of war between what it is that they want to do and what we want to do. And this can cause offense, it can cause hurt, and cause us now to be unloving, unforgiving, can cause us to stonewall, and can lead to the end of the relationship. So how can two people who have different views and different understandings, different perspectives, coexist with each other and keep the relationship going in the midst of differences? The answer to me is boundaries. Yeah, I believe that arguments are not necessary in relationship. Some of you may think differently. You may have disagreements. I believe disagreements are inevitable. However, an argument, a fight, is not necessary. And the more arguments and fights we have is the more difficult it is to hold on to our relationships. Things that are hurting us are not necessarily easy to hold on to. If you can imagine yourself holding on to a hot cup of coffee, the longer you hold on to it, the more the burn comes through. But oftentimes it cools down, it starts to become cooler. It becomes easier for you to hold it. And that's what we want for relationships as well. I mean, there are times when things are gonna get very hot, and that's inevitable, especially if you and your person come from two different backgrounds, you both have two different brains, two different ways of doing things. It's gonna get hot. But then boundaries are those things that help us to cool things down and make the relationship more palatable, more bearable. And so we have to, as I said before, be able to set boundaries ourselves so that we can set boundaries with other people. What are some boundaries that we can set with the people that we are closest to, our loved ones? Well, primarily you want to set boundaries in the realm of communication. Yeah. Where you can say to your partner, all right, under no circumstances is it allowed for us to curse at each other, use curse words when we're angry at each other. We should not be raising our voices and shouting at each other. We should not be disrespecting each other, calling each other out of each other's names, or putting anybody down, belittling anybody. Right? None of that is allowed. And so you can set these boundaries ahead of time before an argument comes up. Now, in the midst of the argument, these boundaries may just fly through the window. Or if your partner uses a curse word toward you, you need to be able to stop the conversation at that point and address that breach. Do not let it slide. Don't gloss over it and sweep it under the rug and just to keep the peace or just to keep the conversation going. No. Typically, those of us in our relationship who are peacemakers, we get steamrolled. We get walked over.
That's why I get walked over.
It's not that our partner is a bad person. I've probably said before, we teach people how to treat us. And so, whatever you allow to happen is more than likely to happen again and happen more frequently. So, any breach in a boundary has to be addressed immediately. A weed that is caught in its infant stage is a lot easier to uproot than a tree that is full grown. Not true? Yeah, man. So when it comes down to boundaries in your relationship, once you set that boundary, if that boundary is breached, you have to be firm and speedy with addressing it. Because if you're not, then more than likely the person is going to feel as if this boundary is not really serious and they can continue with the behavior. Yeah? Let's say you want to set a boundary with regards to how you interact in public. You may have somebody who is very touchy-feely and is okay with public displays of affection, and you personally are not comfortable with that. You can communicate in a respectful way and in a loving way, because oftentimes people who are about that life, public displays of affection, if you just outrightly say no to them, they'll feel rejected, they'll feel unloved, they'll feel undesirable, and that's probably not the case. That's probably not what you want to convey. You want to convey to them that they are desirable, that you are attracted to them, but you're not comfortable with expressing your physical desire for them in a public setting, and that's perfectly fine. So how you go about setting that boundary is to say, hey babe, I'm very flattered that you want to hug and kiss on me in front of other people. However, I am personally uncomfortable with that and would prefer we refrain from that and reserve that for the privacy of our own home or an own bedroom. I'd really appreciate it if you would desist from trying to grope me and kiss me in public. And that's that. Right? And then now it's up to them to agree with it. Now they may try to push you on your boundary. They may try to say, it's not that big of a deal. Plus, I want everybody to know how proud I am of you and how happy I am to be with you. I want to show you all, and I want to do all these things. And again, you would say, that's great, and I appreciate that you want to do that, but I am uncomfortable, right? And I would prefer we not. Now, let's say you're out in public, and this is after the discussion, and they decide to try and grope you and kiss you in front of other people. As I said before, this is an issue you have to nip in the bud. However, you don't necessarily want to disrespect your partner in public. You don't want to belittle them. You don't want them to feel embarrassed. So my recommendation is to go with whatever they may be doing, with a kiss, trying to kiss you, hug on you, hold your hand, or whatever public display of affection. However, when you get back home or you get back into a private space, you bring it up to them. Do not sweep it under the rug. You bring it up to them and let them know that you are uncomfortable with that, and that going forward, you're going to take a particular action that they may not like. So you communicate before taking the action. Because easily you could have been like, get off of me, you could have pushed them away, which would have made it seem as if you are unhappy with them, or as if there isn't harmony in your relationship, when there really may be harmony in your relationship, but it's just that they are really into public displays of affection and you're not, right? You don't want to convey disunity to other people around, right? And you don't want them to feel belittled or small. So I would say you give in at that point in time to whatever their desire is, and then now, off the air, you address it, right? And let them know it cannot happen again. If it does happen again, you take a more drastic response to probably rejecting them at that point. And that's reasonable. That's reasonable. Let's say you want your husband to reach home at a particular time to have dinner. He's always coming home late. But you want him to have dinner with you at the dinner table. Whole family together. But he's consistently late. Now you don't have control over his behavior. You only have control over yours, right? So you can communicate to him that this is the time for dinner. It is 6 p.m. every evening. And I want for you to be here to have dinner with the family. However, the boys need to get to bed at a certain time. I have other stuff that I need to do. And so this is the time that works for us. And we know that your work ends at 4 p.m. So you can be home by 6 p.m. to have dinner. You have a 2-hour window to be home in time for dinner. Please be here for dinner. Otherwise, we'll be forced to pack up your food and you'll have to warm it up and have dinner by yourself. And if your husband, your partner, wants to have dinner with the family, wants to have a freshly made and warm meal, not out of the fridge, not something he has to pop into the microwave, then the onus is now on him to make whatever adjustments he needs to make to be at the dinner table at 6 p.m. Right? You don't shout, you don't cuss him off for always being late, you don't try to belittle him or put him down. You just communicate what you will do if he is not on time. You and children will have your dinner and go about your business as normal. And you also will express that you really do want him to be there. You do miss him when he's not there. However, you have to set this boundary. I'm also finding that I have to set a boundary with a couple of friends I have of mine right now, where I bring my friends to church, right? And one of them in particular lives out of my way. I have to go out of my way to pick up this friend to bring him to church, right? And so it is an inconvenience for me, burning my gas, forcing me to have to get out earlier than I normally would have to get out in order to go pick up this person to bring them to church and bring them back home. And I hate it when I show up at the gate and then have to wait for another 10-15 minutes for this guy to come out of the apartment so that I can bring him to church. Especially if I'm trying to get to church for a particular time to catch the start of Sunday school. So I have to say to him, to set a boundary, like, okay, I'm going to be here at 8:30 in the morning. If I am here at 8:30 in the morning and 8:35 strikes and you're not in this car, I'm going to leave. That's the boundary. Now, if 8:35 comes and he's not in the car, I'm out because I've communicated, right? I've communicated that I hate being late and that I am making the sacrifice to come and pick you up, to bring you to church. All I ask for you to do is be on time. right? And so a lot of people struggle with the whole idea of time and being on time. But they don't realize that they're causing an inconvenience for other people, right? Now, if you want your relationship to remain respectful, you want the person to respect you, you have to be able to draw your line and stand on your line. So don't say you're going to do something and don't do it. Don't tell your friend, if 8:35 comes and you're not in this car, I'm going to drive off, and then it's 8:40 and you're still there at the gate. No, you're teaching the person how to treat you, and you're teaching the person that you're not so serious about your boundaries. Whatever boundary that you're setting, right? It's for the purpose of keeping the relationship between you and the other person healthy. And yes, it can be a bit uncomfortable to drive off and leave somebody, or to put your husband's food in the fridge for him to warm up when he comes home because he keeps coming home too late. It can feel a bit uncomfortable because you know that you're inconveniencing the other person. But sometimes you have to think about yourself and be like, this person is inconveniencing me. They're causing me discomfort. And I think I'm doing my best for their sake, so I believe they should do their best for my sake as well. And that's perfectly okay. Yeah. So yeah, friends, when it comes on to setting boundaries with the people in your life, because not all of us are the same. I may be a stickler for time, but somebody else is not. I may be a stickler for a neat and tidy space, and somebody else is not. All right, but we still need to coexist. We still need to live lovingly toward one another, and we need to guard our hearts against resentment. Because once resentment starts to take root in our heart, then comes contempt, and then when contempt is coloring all of your actions and attitudes, behaviors, thoughts, when you get to that point in your relationship, man, it can be so difficult to cultivate a happy relationship, all because of what you have allowed in the relationship. So yes, when a person is crossing your boundary, you have to nip it in the bud. But first of all, you have to communicate what that boundary is. So don't be lashing out at nobody and punishing anybody for crossing a boundary that they know nothing about. Say to them what you are going to do if they do not comply with your boundary. And when they don't comply with your boundary, you have to stand on your word. And then you give them a second chance. Like, okay, I left you at home this time around, bro. I told you to be out there by 8:35. You weren't out there, so I had to just leave you. But hey, I'll come back again for you next week. Be out there by 8:35, and you'll have a right to church. Otherwise, it's going to be the same lesson, The same way you said to your husband, listen, I really want to have this dinner with you, but you got to be there at 6 p.m. If you get home at 6:30, you would have already done eating, already packed up and cleaned up everything. You'll have to get your dinner out of the fridge. And if he does not want that, he's going to come home and be at the dinner table for 6 p.m. And this is how we train people, Train people to treat us with love, right? And within the broader umbrella of love is respect. Yeah. And your relationship is not going to feel comfortable. It's not going to feel sweet if respect is lacking. Right? So yes, friends and family, thank you so much for joining me for yet another episode of the worst relationship advice ever. I hope this was insightful for you. I hope that you go out there and start setting boundaries with your loved ones and communicating what it is that you expect of them so that they can adjust themselves accordingly. And when you do this, you're actually calling people to become better versions of themselves. Because sometimes people are not willing to be disciplined for themselves. but they'll be disciplined for a person that they love and respect. If that person is you, you may be sowing the seed of discipline into their lives that may just snowball into them becoming, better persons for themselves. So definitely put in the effort of setting boundaries. Don't always be a yes man, and don't always be a doormat for other people to walk all over, right? Be self-assured, be self-aware, be self-confident, and know that if a person wants to discard you or do away with you, or because you set a boundary with them, and so be it. Let them walk away. One of the most manipulative things that people do is threaten to leave relationships when you try to set a boundary with them. If a person can't respect your boundary, they're simply not for you. It's okay for them to walk away. Yeah? Alright guys, thank you so much for joining me yet again. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Share this with your friends and family. Hit the like button and leave a comment. Tell me about a time when you set a boundary with a friend or family member. How did they respond? Is your relationship now doing better as a result of that boundary? Or was that boundary more of a wall and now you guys no longer talk to each other? Let me know in the comments, alright? Blessings to you and your family. Please stay safe, and I'll see you next time.